Have you ever wondered if we can truly feel a bond with someone we've never met? What if, in the blink of an eye, a tiny baby could look at a stranger and react as if they were family? It sounds unbelievable, right? Yet, there's a story unfolding right before our eyes that defies all logic and explanation. Today, we're diving deep into a mystery that will challenge everything you thought you knew about human connection, instincts, and science. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll be left speechless. Let's imagine a moment. A stranger walks into a room, and a baby, barely old enough to speak, lights up with a smile that you'd normally expect from a child reuniting with a long-lost parent. The stranger, with no obvious connection to the baby, is greeted with laughter, wide-eyed wonder, and even a hug. You might think it's just a random coincidence, a fluke, but what if I told you it wasn't? What if this baby's reaction wasn't a mistake? That's exactly what we're going to explore today. Stick with me, because the answer will completely change how you see relationships, family, and even our very DNA. As you watch, you'll experience a wave of emotions. You'll feel the warmth of that bond between the baby and a stranger, and at the same time, you'll be filled with curiosity. What could cause such a connection? You might even start to think about your own experiences with family and strangers. Could this be something we're all capable of, this deep, almost instinctual, connection with people we don't even know? Well, the answer may be more scientific than we think. And while we want to uncover that mystery together, I need you to stay with me until the very end because this story gets even more intriguing as we piece it all together. Now, I know what you're thinking, this sounds too good to be true. Maybe you've seen heartwarming videos of babies meeting strangers and thought it was just adorable, a momentary spark of joy. But I want you to pause for a second and think about it. What if there's more to this than we realize? What if this baby's reaction wasn't a coincidence but something rooted deep within our biology? Maybe, just maybe, there's something in our DNA that makes these connections possible, something we haven't even begun to understand. And guess what? We're about to dive into some incredible scientific findings that will make you rethink everything. You'll meet the characters in this story, the curious baby at the heart of it all, the stranger, and even the experts who have studied the intricacies of DNA and human connections. Together, we'll explore the mystery of this connection and what it means for the future of science and human relationships. But here's where it gets even more mind-blowing. As we dig deeper, you'll realize that this isn't just a simple case of a baby reacting to a friendly face. There's evidence, hard, undeniable evidence, that points to a much more extraordinary truth, one that will make you question everything you thought you knew about family and the bonds that unite us. I can already feel you wondering, what's the connection between this baby and the stranger? How could they possibly be linked? Hold tight, because we're about to uncover the shocking results of a DNA test that could prove an astonishing, life-altering theory. I promise you, by the time you reach the end of this video, you'll be so captivated by the twists and turns of this journey that you won't be able to stop thinking about it. You'll want to share it with friends and family, talking about how this story could change the way we think about human relationships forever. So let's take a step back for a moment. Before we reveal the truth, let me ask you this. Have you ever experienced an instant connection with someone? Maybe a stranger, someone you just met, who felt like they had been in your life for years. You've heard about people being kindred spirits or having an unexplainable bond with someone they've just met. Is it possible that there's a deeper, more scientific explanation for these feelings? Could our biology and our DNA be involved in creating these deep, unspoken ties that feel so familiar, so intimate, that it seems like we've known each other forever? We're about to find out. The story you're about to hear is one that's both heartwarming and mind-boggling, full of twists, surprises, and emotional moments. But the true mystery of this journey lies in the unspoken connection between this baby and the stranger, a bond that goes beyond what we can see with our eyes. Could this connection be proof that family is more than just bloodlines and shared genetics? What if we're all connected in ways we've yet to fully comprehend? You've probably heard the phrase, "You can't choose your family," but what if I told you that's not entirely true? Maybe, just maybe, there's something in the universe that brings us closer to certain people, making us feel as though we've always belonged to one another. This story will challenge your beliefs about family, relationships, and how far our instincts stretch. At this point, you might be thinking, How is all of this connected to DNA? What's the scientific explanation? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The connection between the baby and the stranger might seem like a random moment of kindness or affection. But as the DNA test reveals, the reality is far more complex. In fact, what we uncover will take this simple encounter to a whole new level, one that opens up a world of possibilities that we, as humans, have never even considered. You won't believe what happens next. And just when you think you have it all figured out, we hit a roadblock. Some answers lead to even more questions, and you'll find yourself completely absorbed in the story. As we begin to dive deeper into the baby's reaction and the results of the DNA test, you'll be on the edge of your seat. I promise you, you won't want to look away. You're about to discover something truly groundbreaking, something that could change the way we think about human relationships, connection, and even family itself. So, before we go any further, take a deep breath. What you're about to witness will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family, science, and the connections that bind us. And trust me, the answers will leave you speechless. Keep watching, because the truth is closer than you think. Now, stay tuned, because we're about to reveal the unbelievable results of the DNA test that will leave you stunned. You won't believe how this story ends. As we continue this story, let me give you some background on the main character at the heart of this mysterious encounter, the baby, whose reaction to the stranger has left everyone stunned. You see, this baby, let's call them Emma, is not just any baby. She's been the subject of curiosity in her small town ever since the moment she was born. From the start, something about Emma has felt a little different. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made people stop and take notice. It wasn't just her captivating blue eyes or the way she would flash a smile that could melt anyone's heart. No, there was something deeper, something unexplainable, that drew people in, almost like a gravitational pull. But here's where the story takes a twist. Emma's parents, Sarah and Tom, had no idea what was coming. They didn't think anything was unusual when they first noticed their daughter's remarkable ability to make everyone around her feel special. Emma's bond with her family was undeniable, as you'd expect from any loving parent-child relationship. But what they didn't anticipate was the way Emma would react when she was introduced to someone outside the family, someone she'd never met before. It all started when Sarah invited a close family friend, Mark, over to their house for a casual visit. Mark had been a friend of Tom's for years, but Emma had never laid eyes on him before. As soon as Mark walked in, Emma broke into a wide smile, giggled, and reached out her arms to him. It was as if she knew him, as if there was a connection between them that went beyond mere chance. At first, Sarah and Tom thought it was just a fluke, but when this happened with several other strangers, they began to question what was really going on. Every time Emma met someone new, it was the same response: immediate recognition, joy, and comfort. It left Sarah and Tom puzzled, yet somewhat amazed by this strange phenomenon. Then, things took an even stranger turn. One day, during a routine visit to the pediatrician, Emma's reaction to a nurse who had never been introduced to her before was nothing short of bizarre. As soon as the nurse entered the room, Emma's eyes widened, her body stiffened, and she reached out as if trying to embrace her. It wasn't the typical behavior you'd expect from a baby meeting someone for the first time. What made it even stranger was that the nurse was an older woman, with no apparent connection to the family. The nurse, clearly surprised by Emma's behavior, commented that she'd never felt such an immediate and strong bond with a baby before. But was it really a bond, or was something else at play here? That's when Sarah and Tom decided to look deeper into the situation. They didn't just want to chalk it up to coincidence or some weird baby instinct. They wanted to understand why their child was acting this way and, more importantly, who these strangers were to Emma. Was there some kind of genetic or familial connection they weren't aware of? Could it be that Emma was somehow intuitively identifying people she had a deep, unexplainable connection with, people she had known in some previous life, or perhaps even through her DNA? Sarah began to ask around, speaking to friends, family members, and even her own parents. She was hoping to uncover some hidden link, something buried in the family tree that might explain why Emma was behaving this way. It was then that Sarah's mother mentioned a strange occurrence from her own childhood, a story that had long been forgotten. When Sarah was a baby, Her grandmother had claimed that she recognized a distant relative in a stranger during a family gathering. It was a small detail, but it stuck with Sarah, especially after the strange things started happening with Emma. But this wasn't the only oddity. There were whispers in town, rumors that seemed to have no clear origin, but they were there nonetheless. Some people began to suggest that Emma's reactions were a sign of something more, something bigger than just an innocent connection. Was there a hidden family secret that had been buried for generations? Could Emma's unusual behavior be connected to something that no one was ready to confront? The mystery was beginning to snowball, and with it came more questions than answers. Then, things took an even darker turn. A new figure entered the picture, Daniel, a man who had recently moved into town. He was well-dressed, charming, and had a peculiar interest in Emma. He had no apparent connection to Sarah and Tom, yet every time he crossed paths with Emma, the baby seemed to react as though she recognized him. It wasn't just the smiles and giggles that Emma displayed with other strangers. This time, it was different. Emma seemed unusually calm, almost as if she felt safe and secure in his presence. Daniel would often stop by Sarah and Tom's house unannounced, claiming to be checking in on the family. But there was something unsettling about him, something that felt off. Sarah noticed it immediately. There was a coldness in his eyes, a strange intensity in his gaze when he looked at Emma. It made her uncomfortable, but she couldn't put her finger on why. What was his connection to Emma? And why was she reacting so strongly to him? Could he be the key to understanding the mystery? Or was he just another red herring in a story that was becoming increasingly difficult to decipher? The suspicions surrounding Daniel began to grow, but there was no evidence to suggest that he was anything but a friendly neighbor. Still, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And then, just when she thought things couldn't get any stranger, she received an unexpected letter in the mail, a letter from an unknown sender, with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a cryptic message: "Emma knows more than you think. She's not who you believe her to be." What did this mean? Who could have sent it? And why was the letter addressed specifically to Sarah and Tom? The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but with each new revelation, the mystery only deepened. Was Emma really just an innocent baby with a special gift, or was there something more sinister at play? Could the key to unlocking this entire enigma be tied to the very DNA that made up Emma's being? The more Sarah and Tom searched for answers, the more they were drawn into a web of secrets and lies, one that led them down paths they never expected to travel. As they began to dig into their family history, they uncovered old connections, forgotten stories, and strange coincidences that linked them to people they had never even met. But what they were about to learn next would blow the lid off the mystery completely, and the truth would be far more shocking than they could ever have imagined. Now, you're probably wondering, what's the real connection between Emma and this mysterious stranger, Daniel? Why does the baby react to him like family, and what does this have to do with the strange letter? Are we getting closer to the truth, or is this just another dead end? The tension is mounting, and with each new clue, the story becomes even more tangled. Stay with me, because we're about to uncover the most shocking piece of the puzzle yet, one that could turn everything you thought you knew about family and DNA upside down. As Sarah and Tom pushed further into their investigation, the obstacles they faced grew more and more insurmountable. At first, they had believed they were just dealing with a strange, inexplicable series of coincidences, but now, they were starting to sense that there were forces working against them. The closer they came to the truth, the more things seemed to go wrong. They had a sense that someone, or something, didn't want them to uncover what lay hidden beneath the surface of Emma's mysterious connection with the stranger, Daniel. The first blow came when Sarah decided to follow up on the cryptic letter. She began to dig deeper into the family's history, hoping to find a link to some long-lost relative or a forgotten chapter in their past that might explain the bizarre events surrounding Emma. She contacted a distant cousin who was a genealogist, someone who had access to old family records. The cousin promised to help her uncover any hidden family connections, and Sarah felt a glimmer of hope that this could finally lead them to answers. But just a few days later, something unimaginable happened. The documents Sarah had been sent, vital records, birth certificates, and even photographs, disappeared. It was as if they had been erased from existence. Sarah searched through her house, called the cousin multiple times, but the papers were gone. Her cousin insisted they had sent everything they had, but there was no sign of the records anywhere. It was as if someone had intentionally stolen the key to her family's past, and Sarah was left standing in a sea of uncertainty. To make matters worse, Sarah began receiving strange phone calls in the middle of the night. The voice on the other end was distorted, unrecognizable, and it never left a message. Just a few chilling words, sometimes nothing but a breath, before the line went dead. Sarah's skin would crawl every time she picked up the phone, and Tom grew increasingly concerned. But no matter how many times they tried to trace the calls, there was no way to pinpoint the source. Was someone watching them, someone who didn't want them to dig any deeper into Emma's mysterious reactions to certain people? The more they tried to connect the dots, the more the pieces seemed to slip through their fingers. In the midst of this mounting pressure, a new player entered the scene. Daniel, the stranger who had become such a central figure in Emma's strange behavior, reached out to Sarah and Tom in a seemingly innocent way. He had heard about their search for answers and offered his help. He suggested that they meet for coffee, telling them that he had some information that could help clarify things. He was charming, confident, and so smooth in his words that it was hard for them to resist the idea of getting his perspective. After all, who better than the person Emma seemed to have such a strong connection with? But as they met with Daniel, a subtle unease began to grow in Sarah's chest. While he spoke kindly and thoughtfully, there was something in his eyes that felt cold, calculating. His offers of assistance seemed almost too perfect, as though he had all the answers they were seeking, and that didn't sit right with her. Why would someone who barely knew them, someone who had no real ties to their family, be so eager to help? What was his true motivation? Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was hiding something. Could he be part of the mystery, perhaps even the one pulling the strings behind the scenes? Was he involved in the disappearance of the family records, or was he trying to distract them with false hope? It was this growing suspicion that led Sarah to dig even deeper, though she had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. She began to feel as though she was walking a fine line, not knowing who to trust. After all, in a small town, everyone knew everyone else. Could one of their neighbors, someone they had trusted for years, be hiding a dark secret? Or was Daniel simply the key to something much more sinister? The more she thought about it, the more confusing it became. Tom, however, had become increasingly skeptical of Daniel, sensing the same unease Sarah was feeling but in a quieter way. Yet he didn't know if they could afford to alienate the one person who seemed to hold the answers to their questions. And then came the phone call that changed everything. Sarah had been trying to make contact with an old friend who worked as a private investigator. This friend had promised to look into Daniel's background, to find any discrepancies or potential links to Emma. But just as Sarah was about to meet with her friend for an update, the investigator's office was broken into. The files were gone, the computer had been wiped clean, and the investigator himself had vanished without a trace. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints left behind, just a trail of unanswered questions. Sarah felt the walls closing in on her. Who was behind this? Why was someone so determined to stop them from uncovering the truth? The mounting tension was suffocating, and it felt as if the very answers they sought were being hidden from them, as if a shadow was lurking just beyond their reach. Now, with no records, no investigator, and no clear ally to trust, Sarah and Tom were left in a terrifying place of uncertainty. They felt like they were constantly being watched, as if every step they took was being monitored by someone with more power than they could comprehend. But just when Sarah thought things couldn't get any worse, she stumbled across an old photograph in the attic, one that had been tucked away in a box, buried under years of dust. It was a photo of a woman who looked shockingly similar to Emma. The resemblance was undeniable, and there was something else written on the back of the photograph, in a faded ink, was a single name, Lila. Sarah's heart raced as she turned the photograph over and over in her hands. Who was Lila? And why had this photo been hidden away? Was Lila someone from their past? Someone who might have had a deep, unknown connection to Emma? The sudden appearance of this photograph only deepened the mystery. Was it a clue that Emma's true origins were something more complex than they had ever imagined? Was Emma's connection to Daniel linked to this mysterious woman, Lila? And why did it feel like someone was desperately trying to keep this information from them? The pieces were starting to fit together, but there were still so many unknowns. Sarah and Tom were left wondering if they were even remotely close to the truth or if they were simply being led in circles. Was Daniel really the key to unlocking the secret, or was he part of the puzzle they hadn't even begun to solve? One thing was clear, they were on the edge of uncovering something massive, but as the truth grew closer, so did the danger. The pressure was mounting, the mystery deepening, and the stakes were higher than ever. With every passing day, they could feel the walls closing in, and there was no way of knowing who or what was behind it all. Would they ever uncover the truth? Or would they be forced to walk away from the mystery, forever left in the dark? Stay tuned, because the twist that's about to come will change everything you thought you knew about this story. Just as Sarah and Tom were beginning to piece together the fragments of their investigation, the situation took a turn they could never have anticipated. It wasn't just them anymore, this mystery was starting to reach beyond their family, stretching its tendrils into the lives of those they cared about most. As if the weight of the unknown wasn't enough, a chilling new development made it clear that the danger they faced wasn't limited to just Emma, Sarah, and Tom. It was something bigger, something far more sinister. The first hint of this new twist came one evening when Sarah's sister, Rachel, received an unexpected package at her door. At first glance, it seemed innocuous enough, just a plain brown envelope, no return address, no markings to indicate where it had come from. But when Rachel opened it, her hands trembled. Inside was a photograph exactly like the one Sarah had discovered in the attic, the one with the name Lila written on the back. But this time, the photo showed a woman standing alongside Sarah's mother, smiling in what appeared to be a family gathering from years ago. There was something unsettling about the image, something that sent a chill down Rachel's spine. The woman in the photo, Lila, wasn't just familiar, she looked hauntingly similar to Emma. And there, on the back of the photo, was another name scribbled in a hurried hand: "Keep looking, or else." Rachel had no idea who would have sent such a thing, but the message couldn't have been clearer. Someone with knowledge of their family's past, was watching them closely. They weren't just threatening Sarah and Tom anymore, they were threatening everyone. Rachel immediately called Sarah, her voice shaky, trying to piece together the strange coincidence of receiving the same photograph. But as soon as Sarah picked up, Rachel couldn't help but notice how rattled her sister was. There was a fear in Sarah's voice that hadn't been there before, an unease that sent a wave of cold through Rachel's chest. "I just found something else," Sarah whispered, as though the very act of speaking the words aloud would make them more real, more dangerous. She told Rachel about the photograph she had found, the one hidden away in the attic, and about the name Lila. What was even more unsettling was that the name Lila wasn't new to Rachel. Their mother had mentioned it before, in passing, many years ago, but always with a certain hesitance, a tone that suggested there was a deeper story she didn't want to tell. It was a story about someone from their past, someone their mother had known long ago, someone their mother had tried to forget. But why now? Why would this mysterious figure, Lila, be haunting their family again after all these years? And why was the threat "keep looking, or else" tied to it? What did it mean, and who else knew about the family secrets they were desperately trying to uncover? The tension between the sisters grew with every passing minute. Rachel didn't know whether she should be more afraid of the person sending these warnings or of the secret that was clearly being kept from them. The feeling that they were being pushed into a corner, with nowhere left to turn, was overwhelming. Sarah knew they had no choice but to keep digging. After all, they had already crossed the line, there was no turning back now. But what if, just maybe, they were opening a door that could never be closed again? What if this mystery was bigger than just Emma and Daniel? In the days that followed, things only escalated. Sarah and Tom began to notice strange figures in their neighborhood, people who would watch their house from across the street, lurking in the shadows, barely visible. Were these just concerned citizens, worried about the strange happenings surrounding Emma? Or were they part of something more dangerous, something that had been carefully orchestrated for years? It was impossible to say. And when Tom went to the local police to report the mysterious happenings, including the strange phone calls and threats, they were met with indifference, almost as if the officers didn't believe him, or worse, didn't want to get involved. It was becoming clear that whatever was happening, it had deep roots in the town. This wasn't something they could just report to the authorities and have resolved. They were on their own. And then, Just when Sarah thought she couldn't handle any more uncertainty, she received a phone call, one that made her heart stop. The voice on the other end was distorted, like the others, but this time, the words sent a new shockwave through her. "Lila isn't who you think she is," the voice said. The line clicked, and the call ended. That was it. No explanation, no further details, just a cryptic warning that made everything even more confusing. Was Lila truly connected to the danger that was closing in on them? And what did it mean that Lila isn't who you think she is? Had they been wrong about the entire investigation? Was there something they had missed, something so important that it could shatter everything they believed to be true? Just when Sarah thought the walls were closing in, another shocking revelation made her question everyone's motives. She had been speaking with a few other people in town, people who had lived there for decades, and they seemed to know more about Lila than they let on. One evening, she visited an elderly woman named Claire, a former neighbor who had once been very close to their family. Claire had always been a source of comfort and wisdom, someone Sarah trusted. But when Sarah mentioned Lila's name, Claire's face drained of color. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there. Claire quickly changed the subject, brushing it off as a family matter that was better left in the past. But Sarah knew something was being concealed. There was a feeling, deep in her gut, that Claire knew far more than she was letting on, something that could change the entire course of their investigation. Why was Claire so terrified of Lila's name? And what role did she play in this entire web of secrets? Was she the key to unraveling the truth, or was she another piece in a larger puzzle designed to keep them in the dark? As Sarah and Tom found themselves caught in a whirlwind of lies, deception, and danger, they began to realize that they might not be the only ones searching for answers. Their every move was being watched, and someone was pulling strings from the shadows. Every clue they unearthed seemed to lead to more questions, and every ally they trusted seemed to have their own agenda. It was becoming harder to discern who was on their side and who was secretly working against them. Now, more than ever, Sarah and Tom were faced with the overwhelming question: who could they trust? And were they getting closer to the truth, or had they unknowingly walked straight into a trap? The stakes were higher than ever, and as the mystery continued to unfold, it seemed as if every answer brought them closer to a truth that could shatter their world and change everything they thought they knew about their family, their town, and the very connections that bound them together. The dark cloud of unease that had been hanging over Sarah and Tom for weeks finally broke, only this time. It wasn't the kind of revelation they had been hoping for. They weren't just on the edge of something dangerous anymore, they were right in the heart of it. Everything had been building toward this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for the brutal turn their lives were about to take. The feeling that something was wrong had always been a distant hum in the back of their minds, but it was becoming undeniable now. They were being watched. Every time Sarah stepped outside, she felt eyes on her, though when she turned around, no one was there. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every car passing by felt deliberate, as if they were being followed. At first, Sarah tried to brush it off. After all, it was easy to convince yourself that you were just being paranoid, especially when so much of what had been happening lately was beyond explanation. But it wasn't paranoia anymore. It was real. The first real sign of danger came when Sarah came home late one evening after visiting Claire, the elderly woman who had become increasingly distant. The moment she stepped into her house, she felt something wasn't right. The front door was slightly ajar, just a crack, nothing too obvious, but enough to make her heart race. Her breath caught in her throat as she stepped inside, her senses heightened. Every muscle in her body tense. She called out for Tom, but there was no response. The house was eerily silent. Too silent. It didn't take long for her to find out what had been tampered with. The kitchen drawer, where she kept important papers, some of Emma's baby records, and even the letter from the mysterious sender, was wide open. Everything had been touched. Papers were out of place, and the photo of Lila that she had hidden away, the one with the cryptic message on the back, was now missing. Someone had been in her home, someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. Her stomach turned in knots as she rushed to check on Emma, who was asleep in her crib. At least that was one piece of comfort, but even that felt fleeting. Tom still hadn't returned from his errand, and every second that ticked by felt like another piece of their safety slipping away. As Sarah stood in the silence of their home, She realized how much had changed in such a short time. She wasn't just investigating a strange connection between Emma and this mysterious stranger, she was involved in something far bigger, something dangerous, and she didn't know who to trust anymore. The night passed uneventfully, but the following morning brought new terror. Tom left early for work, his usual routine, and Sarah had hoped that things might calm down for a moment. But as the day dragged on, an unsettling feeling of dread washed over her. She went to the front door, checking the mailbox for a letter or any communication that might provide answers. Instead, what she found was a note, hastily scribbled in dark ink, tucked under the door. The message was simple: "We know where you are. Stay out of this, or your daughter will be next." Sarah's heart stopped. The words felt like a punch to the gut, a cold reminder that they weren't just dealing with some harmless prank or misguided investigation. This was real. This was a warning. But from who? Who could have known where she lived, where Emma slept, or how far they were willing to go to stop them from uncovering the truth? The panic surged in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. She couldn't afford to lose control, not when the stakes had gotten so much higher. With trembling hands, she called Tom. He didn't pick up. She tried again. No answer. Her mind raced as she tried to think of anything that could explain his sudden absence. Maybe he was just busy, or caught in traffic, or no. Something was wrong. Her gut told her something was terribly off. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she quickly grabbed her phone, sending him a message. No reply. The minutes ticked by, stretching into hours, each one heavier than the last. By now, Sarah was certain that something had happened to him, and it wasn't just a coincidence. When the afternoon came, Sarah felt as though she couldn't breathe. She knew she couldn't sit still any longer, that she needed to take action, to find Tom and figure out what was really going on. But then, just as she was about to leave the house to look for him, the phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but she picked up anyway, desperate for any kind of news. "Hello?" she asked, her voice shaky. The voice on the other end was distorted, familiar, yet eerily cold, like something robotic. It was hard to place, but there was no mistaking the chilling tone. "Stop looking," the voice warned, "you've gone too far. Leave this alone, or the next one to disappear won't be your husband. It'll be your daughter." The line went dead before she could even respond. Sarah's body went cold. It felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath her. Who was doing this? Who had the power to threaten them like this? And why? She couldn't ignore it any longer. This wasn't just about Emma and the strange connection with Daniel. This was a threat to her entire family, to their lives, to their future. Whoever was behind this was willing to take everything from them, to destroy them if they didn't comply. Sarah realized, with a terrifying clarity, that they had stepped too far into a world they didn't understand, a world of shadows and threats where there was no going back. With no time to waste, Sarah did the only thing she could think of. She packed a bag, grabbed Emma, and left the house. It wasn't safe anymore, not for any of them. But as she stepped into the car, a new, unsettling thought crept into her mind. Had they been followed? The night before, there had been a car parked outside their house, and when Sarah had looked through the window, the headlights had flashed off as soon as she caught a glimpse. Was someone watching them, waiting for the moment when they would make a mistake? Was she making a mistake now by running, by leaving Tom behind to face whatever had been set in motion? She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being pulled deeper into a game, a dangerous game that no one had warned them about. And no matter how hard she tried to piece the clues together, no matter how many times she turned over the facts in her mind, she could never seem to connect the dots in a way that made sense. What was the connection between Emma and Daniel? What did Lila have to do with any of this? Why were they being hunted, and what did the mysterious threats want them to stop digging into? And most terrifying of all, if someone could disappear Tom just like that, who was next? There were more questions now than ever, and the weight of the mystery had shifted. They weren't just investigating, it was now a race against time, a race to protect their family before everything they loved was ripped away from them. The stakes had never been higher. And the truth, whatever it was, seemed further out of reach than ever. Just as Sarah was about to drive off, her heart pounding with the weight of everything that had happened, a sudden thought stopped her in her tracks. It wasn't the voice on the phone or the chilling threat that had left her paralyzed, it was something she hadn't considered before, something she had dismissed all along. What if everything they'd been chasing, everything they'd been uncovering, wasn't the full story? What if the answers they sought were right in front of them all along, hidden in plain sight, but they had been looking in the wrong direction? She had spent days poring over the same evidence, retracing her steps, always focusing on Lila and the cryptic warnings. But what if Lila wasn't the key after all? What if the connection they were desperately trying to understand wasn't the one they thought it was? And more importantly, what if the people they trusted most, Tom, even Claire, weren't who they claimed to be? The thought gnawed at her, an uncomfortable realization that wouldn't let go. Her eyes darted to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following her, but it wasn't just the paranoia of being watched that unsettled her. It was the sudden realization that she had missed something huge, a hidden thread woven through all their interactions that she had completely overlooked. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. It was a text message from Tom. The relief she felt was brief, he was safe, but his message didn't make sense. He simply wrote, "I didn't want to do this, but I have no choice. You'll find out soon enough." That was it. No explanation. No context. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen, a million thoughts racing through her mind. What was he talking about? What could he possibly have done to feel like he had no choice? With a growing sense of urgency, Sarah dialed Tom's number, but the call went straight to voicemail. The pit in her stomach deepened. She couldn't just sit back anymore, not when the stakes were so high, not when there was so much at risk. She knew she had to go to him, find out what was happening, even if it meant putting herself and Emma in danger. But as she pulled onto the road and turned the corner toward the direction she thought Tom had gone, something odd caught her eye. It was the figure of a man, standing at the edge of the street, watching her car approach. Her heart skipped a beat, but this time, it wasn't the fear of being followed, it was the unsettling sense that she recognized him. For a split second, her mind couldn't place him, but the familiarity struck her. She had seen him before, he was always around, in the background of all the family gatherings, the kind of person who never stood out, never drew attention. But he had been there, always in the shadows, never far from the scene. The man from the photograph, the one she had found hidden in the attic. The man in the picture had been standing next to her mother, smiling like a close family friend, but now, Sarah realized the truth, he had always been more than that. The chilling revelation hit her like a hammer, and with it came the sickening realization that the puzzle pieces had been in front of her the entire time, and she had missed them. Her mother had known him, intimately. He wasn't just a stranger, or a forgotten friend from years past. He had been part of something much darker, something that her mother had never wanted anyone to know. And what was even more shocking was that he had been right there in her life, in her family's life, for years, hiding in plain sight. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel as she stared at the man who was now walking away, disappearing down an alley before she could even stop to confront him. He knew she had seen him, and there was no mistaking the way he had glanced back over his shoulder. He wasn't afraid of her, he was trying to lead her somewhere. To the truth, perhaps. But what truth? As the weight of this new realization settled in, Sarah's thoughts scattered. She had been so focused on solving the mystery of Emma's connection to Lila, but that connection might have been nothing more than a red herring. Lila wasn't the person to fear, this man, this shadow from her past, was the one who had always been pulling the strings. And the message from Tom, it wasn't a message of hope or a cry for help. It was a warning. A confession. Desperation took over as Sarah floored the gas pedal, chasing after the figure she had just seen, but as she turned the corner, she was greeted with an empty street. The man was gone. No trace, no sign of him anywhere. Was he even real? Had she imagined it? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but there was one thing she knew for certain, this mystery had turned a corner. What she had believed was a simple investigation into Emma's connection to someone from her past was much darker, much more twisted than she could have ever imagined. When Sarah finally reached Tom's office, she found it locked and dark. She pounded on the door, calling his name, but there was no answer. The same cold dread washed over her as she realized that Tom was missing again. And it wasn't just his disappearance that was disturbing, it was the nagging feeling that he had known all along. The phone call, the message, the fear in his voice when he had warned her about digging too deep, it all pointed to the same thing. Tom wasn't the person she thought he was. He was hiding something. And she was beginning to wonder if he had been part of the game all along, a piece of a much larger puzzle she was only now starting to understand. As Sarah stood there, fighting the rising panic and confusion, the world around her felt like it was closing in. The truth she had been chasing was slipping further from her grasp. Every clue, every lead, only raised more questions. It wasn't just about Emma or Lila or even the man from the photo, it was about a web of lies and deceit that had been spun for years, and she had been right in the center of it, blind to everything happening around her. The twisted truth had always been there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for her to discover it. And now that she was on the verge of understanding, the people she had trusted most were vanishing, leaving her alone in a dangerous game that was far from over. Who could she trust now? Was the truth even worth uncovering, or had she already lost everything that mattered in her search for answers? Sarah stood motionless in front of Tom's office, the weight of the past few hours pressing on her chest like an invisible force. The darkness inside the office mirrored the storm raging in her mind, each unanswered question threatening to break her apart. She had trusted him, had placed her faith in their life together, in the quiet moments they shared. But now, as the truth unraveled before her eyes, it was becoming clear that the person she had shared so many years with might not be who she thought he was at all. The more she pieced the puzzle together, the more she realized that everything, every secret, every moment of their life together had been constructed on lies. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a message from Tom. It was a call. The number was unfamiliar, but Sarah answered it anyway, her heart in her throat. A cold, familiar voice greeted her on the other end. "You've gone too far, Sarah. Now you're in this deeper than you ever thought possible. We can make this all stop if you just walk away. But if you don't, we will make sure no one gets out unscathed." It was the same distorted voice from before, but this time it was more certain, more threatening. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat as the words sunk in. Was it just a warning? Or was it a final ultimatum? She didn't know. She couldn't know. The stakes had just reached a point where the consequences were impossible to ignore. She could feel the walls closing in, a pressure she couldn't escape. "Listen to me, Sarah," the voice continued, "you're in this for the wrong reasons. Your family, your daughter, none of them will be safe if you keep digging. Do you understand? You need to make a choice. Stop now, and everyone walks away. Keep going, and we will make sure you lose everything. And I mean everything." The line went dead, leaving Sarah in a thick silence that only magnified the weight of what had just been said. What was she supposed to do now? How could she just walk away from something so huge, so entangled with her own life? The truth had already cost her more than she ever thought possible, and now she was staring down the barrel of a choice that felt impossible to make. She thought of Emma, sleeping peacefully at home. The thought of her daughter being caught in the crossfire of this tangled web of lies made Sarah's heart break into pieces. She couldn't risk Emma's safety, not when she knew the kind of people she was dealing with. But at the same time, how could she just walk away from the truth? From understanding what had been hidden from her for all these years? How could she allow whatever shadow had been stalking them to continue without getting answers? Her mind raced, torn between her instincts as a mother and her desire to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As she made her way back to the car, the world outside felt suffocating, like everything was closing in on her at once. She had always believed that knowing the truth would set her free, that once she pieced everything together, it would all make sense. But now, every piece of information seemed to pull her deeper into a maze of betrayal, manipulation, and secrets that felt beyond her ability to untangle. The more she learned, the less she seemed to understand. The truth didn't feel like freedom, it felt like a weight too heavy to carry. By the time she reached home, Sarah was barely holding it together. She could feel the sting of her own thoughts clawing at her as she stepped inside. Emma was in her crib, sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the danger closing in on them. It was the only shred of normalcy left in her life. But even that felt fragile now, like a thread that could snap at any moment. Suddenly, Sarah heard the sound of the door creaking open. She froze. Was someone else in the house? Her pulse quickened as she glanced toward the hallway. A figure stepped into the living room, Tom. His face was drawn, pale, and there was something in his eyes, something that was hard to place. He looked at her, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The silence between them stretched, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid. "I had to," Tom whispered, his voice barely audible. "I didn't have a choice, Sarah. You don't understand. I never wanted to hurt you, but this is bigger than both of us." Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she fought to steady her breath. "What do you mean, Tom? What's going on? What did you get involved in? Why are we being threatened?" Her voice cracked with desperation. She had to know. She couldn't keep living in the dark, trying to piece everything together on her own. Tom ran a hand through his hair, looking like a man caught between two worlds. "I didn't want you to find out this way. But you need to listen to me. We're not safe anymore. None of us are. I got pulled into something I couldn't get out of. And now they're not just after me, they're after us. After you." The words hit her like a blow to the chest, and Sarah's mind reeled. She had trusted Tom. She had relied on him to be her partner, her protector. How could he have been involved in something like this? What had he done? "You're telling me, you've known about all this," she demanded, her voice rising with the swell of anger and disbelief. "You knew they were coming after us, and you didn't say anything? You didn't protect us?" Tom flinched at her words, but it was the look in his eyes that sent a chill down her spine. "I tried to protect you. I thought I could keep you safe if I kept you in the dark. I thought I could fix this. But now it's too late. We're all in this together, Sarah, whether you like it or not. And if you keep digging, if you keep pushing, you're going to put Emma in more danger than you can imagine." Her chest tightened as his words settled in, the weight of his confession pressing down on her like a boulder. She had thought they could get through this together, but now, everything she thought she knew about their life, about Tom, was shattered. Was he protecting her, or manipulating her? The tension between them thickened, and Sarah could feel the full force of the choice she had to make crashing over her. Tom was involved in something far darker than she had ever imagined. But now, with everything hanging in the balance, she had to decide. Would she keep pushing, knowing that it could destroy her family? Or would she pull back, give in to the fear that had been whispering in her ear, and protect the little bit of normalcy she had left? It wasn't just a question of safety anymore, it was a question of truth, of what they were willing to sacrifice to uncover what had been hidden. And as Sarah stood there, torn between her love for her family and the need to know the truth, she knew one thing for certain: the road ahead wasn't just dangerous. It was a minefield, and there was no clear way out. Sarah's mind was racing, each thought more frantic than the last as she stood there, facing Tom. The room felt like it was closing in around her, and for the first time in all of this, she could almost feel the weight of her own breath, shallow and erratic. The revelations were coming too fast now, each new piece of information more disturbing than the last. The pieces she thought she had locked into place were now shifting, forming a bigger picture, one she wasn't prepared for. The scope of it, the sheer scale of what they were involved in, was far beyond anything she'd imagined. This wasn't just about Emma, or Lila, or Tom. This was something much darker, much larger. Tom's face twisted with guilt and fear, the emotions in his eyes telling Sarah everything she didn't want to hear. "I didn't mean for it to go this far, Sarah," he whispered. "But they've already been watching us, monitoring every move. Everything we've done, every step we've taken, they've been one step ahead, always." Sarah's heart skipped. Who are they, Tom?" Her voice was hoarse, the gravity of the situation sinking in deeper with each passing second. She couldn't let him brush this off anymore. There were no more games, no more excuses. She needed the truth, everything, all of it, right now. Tom hesitated, glancing around the room like he was expecting someone to burst in at any moment. His eyes darted nervously to the window, then back to Sarah. "It's bigger than we thought. Way bigger. They've been watching our entire family for years, your mother, Emma, even you, Sarah. We're all connected to something much deeper. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to drag you into it." He stumbled over his words, his voice cracking with fear. They've been manipulating everything. The entire situation with Lila, with Emma, it's all part of it. Her chest tightened, the full weight of his words crashing into her like a tidal wave. She had thought that everything had been about Emma's connection to Lila, but this was something entirely different. Her mother's mysterious past, the strange connections, the people watching her, the threats, it was all part of a conspiracy that stretched far beyond her own family. It was a web that had been spinning for years, and now, she was caught in the middle of it. Before she could even process everything, the door to their apartment creaked open. Sarah froze, her body stiff with tension. Tom's expression changed instantly. "It's too late. We need to leave. Now," he said, his voice urgent, pulling her toward the door. But as he grabbed her arm, a sharp voice called out from behind them. "Leaving already, Tom?" The voice was cold, sharp, and unmistakable. Sarah's blood ran cold as she turned to see Claire standing in the doorway, her face a mask of cold indifference. Claire had always been a part of their circle, a close friend, someone Sarah had trusted like family. But now, seeing the look on her face, Sarah's stomach twisted. Something wasn't right. "Claire," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly, "what's going on? You've been a part of this, haven't you? You've been watching us too." Claire's smile was icy, calculated. "You don't know the half of it, Sarah," she said, stepping further into the room, her eyes flickering to Tom, then back to Sarah. "You've been following all the wrong clues, making all the wrong assumptions. This isn't just about Lila. It's about control. Power. People like us, we're pawns in a game that's much bigger than either of you could ever understand." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the pieces began to click into place. The person she had trusted most, the one she had leaned on for support, had been part of this from the start. The betrayal hit harder than she ever expected. "You're working with them, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice full of disbelief. Claire didn't flinch. "I've been working with them for years, Sarah. You think you're going to uncover the truth? There's no truth left. It's all been written already. Every move you make, every question you ask, it's been planned. This is bigger than your family. Bigger than all of us." The room felt like it was closing in, the air thick with tension. Sarah could feel her pulse in her throat, each second stretching on endlessly as Claire's words echoed in her mind. They had known. All along, they had known. Sarah had been walking right into a trap, and the closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous everything became. Claire wasn't just a bystander. She was part of the conspiracy. Tom's face was pale, his eyes filled with regret and fear. "Sarah, we don't have much time. We need to go. We're not safe here. They've been tracking us, all of us. They know where we are. You have to understand, it's too dangerous to stay here now. You've got to trust me. Please." But Sarah was frozen, her mind spinning. The truth she had been so desperate to uncover now felt like a cruel joke. The closer she came to understanding it, the more fragmented and impossible it became. Claire, once a friend, had turned on her. Tom, who she had trusted with her life, had been keeping secrets. And now, the danger was bigger than anything she could have imagined. Suddenly, Sarah's phone buzzed again. It was a message from an unknown number. She opened it, and her eyes scanned the screen. "You're running out of time. If you want to save your family, you'll need to make a choice. Leave now and never look back, or stay and find out just how far this goes. But know this, there's no going back once you know the truth." The message hung in the air, the words like a final warning, a threat. Her heart pounded, every instinct telling her that she needed to act fast. But how could she choose? How could she walk away now, when so many people she cared about were caught in this mess? How could she leave when the truth was within reach, yet so far out of her grasp? "Sarah," Tom said again, desperation in his voice, "please. Let's go. We can't do this alone. We can't fight them. But we can run." Claire's voice cut through the tension. "Running won't save you, Sarah. You can't outrun this. No matter where you go, they will find you. They always do." The choice was becoming impossible. Every option felt like a dead end, a trap. And just when Sarah thought she couldn't take it anymore, she realized something. The truth wasn't something she could simply walk away from. But neither could she stay. Not with her family at risk. Not with the weight of betrayal hanging over her. The only question left was whether she was willing to pay the price to uncover what had been hidden from her for so long, and if the cost would be more than she could bear. As the urgency mounted, Sarah's world began to feel like it was collapsing in on itself. Every choice seemed to lead to a darker path, every move she made taking her closer to the edge of a cliff she wasn't sure she could survive. The tension in the room was unbearable as Sarah stood in front of Claire, every muscle in her body taut, her mind swirling with the weight of everything she had uncovered. Her hands trembled slightly, but there was no turning back now. Every lie, every secret, every dangerous turn she had taken led to this moment, and she could feel the gravity of it pressing down on her. She had known, deep down, that something was off. There had always been something about Claire's presence that didn't sit right with her, some hidden motive beneath the surface. But now, facing her, Sarah could no longer deny the truth. Claire had been pulling the strings all along, and the answers that had eluded her were right here, locked behind a cold, calculating smile. Claire's eyes glinted with that same detached confidence that had haunted Sarah since this all began. "You still don't understand, do you?" Claire's voice was calm, almost soothing, but there was an edge to it that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "You were never meant to uncover the truth. The moment you started digging, you signed your fate. Everything you've been chasing was orchestrated, every lead you followed, every dead end, all of it. It was always going to end here, with me." Sarah's pulse hammered in her ears. She had expected this, in some part of her. But the finality of it, the weight of Claire's words, made her stomach churn. "Why?" Sarah's voice cracked, raw with emotion, but she forced herself to stay focused. She couldn't let the emotion of it all overwhelm her now. "Why would you do this? To me, to my family? All of it, the lies, the threats, the games. What do you want from us?" Claire's smirk twisted into something darker, more sinister. "It's not what I want from you, Sarah. It's what I needed you for." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing with something almost predatory. "You think you've been looking for answers, but you've been looking in the wrong places. The people you trust, the ones you thought were your allies, they're all part of it. You're not some innocent caught in the crossfire. You're the key to everything. You always have been." The words hit Sarah like a slap, knocking the breath out of her. "What do you mean?" Her mind spun, desperately trying to piece together what Claire was saying, but it felt like there was a thick fog clouding her thoughts. The truth she had been chasing suddenly seemed so much darker, so much more dangerous than she had imagined. Claire's expression shifted into something calculating, almost pitying. "You've always been part of this, Sarah. Your family, your bloodline, it's connected to something much bigger than you can comprehend. The power, the influence, the control, it's all been building up to this. And you're the one who will either make it all fall apart or solidify it. That's why you've been targeted. That's why you're still alive." The room seemed to tilt as the weight of her words pressed down on Sarah. She stumbled back, her mind racing. "It's too late. We need to leave. Now," he said, his voice urgent, pulling her toward the door. But as he grabbed her arm, a sharp voice called out from behind them. "Leaving already, Tom?" The voice was cold, sharp, and unmistakable. Sarah's blood ran cold as she turned to see Claire standing in the doorway, her face a mask of cold indifference. Claire had always been a part of their circle, a close friend, someone Sarah had trusted like family. But now, seeing the look on her face, Sarah's stomach twisted. Something wasn't right. "Claire," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly, "what's going on? You've been a part of this, haven't you? You've been watching us too." Claire's smile was icy, calculated. "You don't know the half of it, Sarah," she said, stepping further into the room, her eyes flickering to Tom, then back to Sarah. "You've been following all the wrong clues, making all the wrong assumptions. This isn't just about Lila. It's about control. Power. People like us, we're pawns in a game that's much bigger than either of you could ever understand." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the pieces began to click into place. The person she had trusted most, the one she had leaned on for support, had been part of this from the start. The betrayal hit harder than she ever expected. "You're working with them, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice full of disbelief. Claire didn't flinch. "I've been working with them for years, Sarah. You think you're going to uncover the truth? There's no truth left. It's all been written already. Every move you make, every question you ask, it's been planned. This is bigger than your family. Bigger than all of us. The room felt like it was closing in, the air thick with tension. Sarah could feel her pulse in her throat, each second stretching on endlessly as Claire's words echoed in her mind. They had known. All along, they had known. Sarah had been walking right into a trap, and the closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous everything became. Claire wasn't just a bystander. She was part of the conspiracy. Tom's face was pale, his eyes filled with regret and fear. Sarah, we don't have much time. We need to go. We're not safe here. They've been tracking us, all of us. They know where we are. You have to understand, it's too dangerous to stay here now. You've got to trust me. Please. But Sarah was frozen, her mind spinning. The truth she had been so desperate to uncover now felt like a cruel joke. The closer she came to understanding it, the more fragmented and impossible it became. Claire, once a friend, had turned on her. Tom, who she had trusted with her life, had been keeping secrets. And now, the danger was bigger than anything she could have imagined. Suddenly, Sarah's phone buzzed again. It was a message from an unknown number. She opened it, and her eyes scanned the screen. You're running out of time. If you want to save your family, you'll need to make a choice. Leave now and never look back, or stay and find out just how far this goes. But know this, there's no going back once you know the truth. The message hung in the air, the words like a final warning, a threat. Her heart pounded, every instinct telling her that she needed to act fast. But how could she choose? How could she walk away now, when so many people she cared about were caught in this mess? How could she leave when the truth was within reach, yet so far out of her grasp? Sarah, Tom said again, desperation in his voice, please. Let's go. We can't do this alone. We can't fight them. But we can run. Claire's voice cut through the tension. Running won't save you, Sarah. You can't outrun this. No matter where you go, they will find you. They always do. The choice was becoming impossible. Every option felt like a dead end, a trap. And just when Sarah thought she couldn't take it anymore, she realized something. The truth wasn't something she could simply walk away from. But neither could she stay. Not with her family at risk. Not with the weight of betrayal hanging over her. The only question left was whether she was willing to pay the price to uncover what had been hidden from her for so long, and if the cost would be more than she could bear. As the urgency mounted, Sarah's world began to feel like it was collapsing in on itself. Every choice seemed to lead to a darker path, every move she made taking her closer to the edge of a cliff she wasn't sure she could survive. The tension in the room was unbearable as Sarah stood in front of Claire, every muscle in her body taut, her mind swirling with the weight of everything she had uncovered. Her hands trembled slightly, but there was no turning back now. Every lie, every secret, every dangerous turn she had taken led to this moment, and she could feel the gravity of it pressing down on her. She had known, deep down, that something was off. There had always been something about Claire's presence that didn't sit right with her, some hidden motive beneath the surface. But now, facing her, Sarah could no longer deny the truth. Claire had been pulling the strings all along, and the answers that had eluded her were right here, locked behind a cold, calculating smile. Claire's eyes glinted with that same detached confidence that had haunted Sarah since this all began. You still don't understand, do you? Claire's voice was calm, almost soothing, but there was an edge to it that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. You were never meant to uncover the truth. The moment you started digging, you signed your fate. Everything you've been chasing was orchestrated, every lead you followed, every dead end, all of it. It was always going to end here, with me. Sarah's pulse hammered in her ears. She had expected this, in some part of her. But the finality of it, the weight of Claire's words, made her stomach churn. Why? Sarah's voice cracked, raw with emotion, but she forced herself to stay focused. She couldn't let the emotion of it all overwhelm her now. Why would you do this? To me, to my family? All of it, the lies, the threats, the games. What do you want from us? Claire's smirk twisted into something darker, more sinister. It's not what I want from you, Sarah. It's what I needed you for. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing with something almost predatory. You think you've been looking for answers, but you've been looking in the wrong places. The people you trust, the ones you thought were your allies, they're all part of it. You're not some innocent caught in the crossfire. You're the key to everything. You always have been. The words hit Sarah like a slap, knocking the breath out of her. What do you mean? Her mind spun, desperately trying to piece together what Claire was saying, but it felt like there was a thick fog clouding her thoughts. The truth she had been chasing suddenly seemed so much darker, so much more dangerous than she had imagined. Claire's expression shifted into something calculating, almost pitying. You've always been part of this, Sarah. Your family, your bloodline, it's connected to something much bigger than you can comprehend. The power, the influence, the control, it's all been building up to this. And you're the one who will either make it all fall apart or solidify it. That's why you've been targeted. That's why you're still alive. The room seemed to tilt as the weight of her words pressed down on Sarah. She stumbled back, her mind racing. Was Claire saying what she thought she was saying? That Sarah wasn't just a victim of circumstance, that she was somehow part of the conspiracy, part of the larger game they had all been caught in? Her blood ran cold as the pieces began to fall into place. The threats, the strange connections, the hidden messages, everything had pointed to this, but she had been too blind to see it. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to make sense of it all. You're lying, she spat, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and fury. You're trying to manipulate me. You want me to believe that I'm part of this, whatever this is, but I won't let you control me anymore. I won't be your pawn. Claire's smile didn't falter. It's not about control, Sarah. It never was. It's about power. And you were born into it. You've been blind to it, but now, the truth is right in front of you. She reached into her pocket, pulling out a small, folded piece of paper, and tossed it onto the table between them. Sarah's eyes flicked down to it, and her breath caught in her throat as she recognized the handwriting, her mother's handwriting. Sarah grabbed the paper, unfolding it with trembling hands. As she scanned the words, her eyes widened in shock. It was a letter, written years ago, but it was addressed to Sarah, to her specifically. Her mother had known everything. The letter described in chilling detail a secret Sarah had never been told, a legacy her mother had been trying to protect her from. But now, there was no hiding from it. The letter spoke of a network of power, of hidden agendas, and of Sarah's central role in it all. Her family wasn't just connected to this conspiracy, they were its architects. Sarah's breath hitched as she read the final words, the truth she had been avoiding for so long crashing down on her. You are the heir to something far greater than you realize. The time has come to claim what is yours, and with it, everything you could ever want. But beware, Sarah, there are those who will stop at nothing to ensure you don't take what's rightfully yours. Trust no one. She looked up at Claire, her mind struggling to catch up with what she had just read. This can't be real, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Claire's expression softened, just slightly, like she was showing Sarah a kindness and understanding. You're not ready to accept it, but you will be. It's in your blood. Everything that's happened, every twist, every turn, it's led to this moment. You're not the victim, Sarah. You're the heir. The question is, will you rise to take your place? The air in the room was suffocating, thick with the weight of Sarah's realization. It felt as though the walls were closing in, the truth sinking deeper and deeper into her soul. Her family's legacy wasn't just one of love and protection, it was one of power, manipulation, and control. And Sarah had always been a part of it, whether she realized it or not. But the real question now was whether she could accept it. Could she embrace the power that had been hidden from her all her life? Or would she walk away from it, knowing that doing so could condemn her, and everyone she loved, to a darker fate? Before Sarah could respond, the sound of a door creaking open interrupted the moment, and a new figure stepped into the room. Lila. Her face was set in grim determination, and in her hand, she held something that made Sarah's heart stop, a small, unmarked envelope. Lila's eyes met Sarah's, and in that moment, Sarah understood. Lila was a part of this too, just as deep, just as tangled in the web of power and secrets. Without a word, Lila stepped forward, handing Sarah the envelope. The final piece. Sarah's hands shook as she opened it, and the contents sent a shock through her system, a photograph. Her mother, younger, standing side by side with Claire. But it wasn't just the photograph that caught Sarah's eye. It was the note attached to it. She is your mother's greatest ally, but not your ally. She has been planning this day for years. Your legacy is not just one of inheritance, but of betrayal. The truth crashed down on Sarah like a tidal wave. Claire wasn't the true villain. There was someone else, someone much closer to her, who had orchestrated this all from the shadows. Someone she had trusted. Someone she had loved. And now, with this final revelation, Sarah had to decide, would she take control of her fate, or would she be swallowed by the very darkness her mother had tried to protect her from? The question hung in the air, and in that moment, everything changed. Sarah sat at the edge of the worn wooden table, the weight of everything she had uncovered settling deep within her bones. The room around her felt suffocating, the walls closing in as she held the photograph in her hands, the note still clutched between her fingers. She could feel the layers of betrayal, of manipulation, peeling back one by one, leaving her exposed. Everything she had believed in had been shattered, her family, her legacy, everything she thought she knew had been a carefully constructed lie. But now, in this moment, Sarah knew what she had to do. She could feel the weight of her mother's words echoing in her mind, the warning that had been left for her long ago, hidden within the folds of secrets: trust no one. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the faint sound of the clock ticking in the corner. Claire, Lila, and even Tom had all faded into the background, each of them playing their part in the puzzle that had been Sarah's life, each of them leaving behind their own mark. The true villain, the mastermind behind everything, had been revealed. But it wasn't the person she thought it was. It wasn't Claire or Lila who had orchestrated it all. It was someone much closer to her, someone who had been in her life every step of the way, pulling strings from the shadows. The revelation had been enough to shake Sarah to her core, but as the fog of confusion began to lift, one thing was clear: she was the one who had to take control now. She could no longer be the victim, no longer let herself be pushed around by the currents of a conspiracy that ran deeper than she could have ever imagined. With the photograph still in her hands, Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. The sun had just set, casting a golden glow across the horizon, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the stirrings of something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Not the naive hope she had once held on to, but a kind of quiet, resolute hope that came from knowing she had the power to change her fate, to reclaim her life from the hands of those who had tried to control it. She wasn't going to let her past define her. She wasn't going to let the sins of those who came before her dictate the course of her future. Her mind raced as she processed everything that had happened: the clues, the lies, the betrayals. The mystery had been complicated, twisted beyond recognition, but at its core, it had always been about one thing: control. Her family, her bloodline, had been part of a web of power for generations, but Sarah was different. She was the key, not because she was destined to inherit the power, but because she had the strength to break free from it. The decisions she made now would shape the rest of her life, but they would also shape the lives of those around her. She wasn't alone in this fight, and she wasn't going to let herself be consumed by the darkness that had tried to swallow her. As Sarah turned away from the window, she felt a shift within herself. The fear that had once gripped her, the uncertainty that had clouded her every decision, was gone. She had made her choice. She was done running from the past, from the legacy that had been thrust upon her. She was going to fight, not with violence, not with power, but with the strength of her conviction. The truth was out now, and nothing would ever be the same again. The pieces of the puzzle had come together, and the final picture was clear. Sarah was free to write her own story, to decide what kind of life she wanted to lead. But as the silence settled around her, as the weight of her decision began to sink in, there was one lingering thought that wouldn't leave her mind. Was she truly free? Or was there something bigger at play, something even more insidious that hadn't been uncovered yet? She glanced at the photograph one more time, the faces staring back at her: her mother, Claire, Lila, the people who had shaped her world in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. For the first time, she wondered if the real battle wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning. Suddenly, a knock at the door broke the stillness. It was a soft, tentative knock, almost as if whoever was on the other side wasn't sure if they should enter. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, her mind already racing with 1,000 possibilities. She had been expecting someone, but the question was, who? As she walked toward the door, she didn't feel the same sense of dread she had once felt. This time, there was something else in her chest, a sense of purpose, a quiet determination. She knew that whatever happened next, she was ready. She had to be. When she opened the door, the figure standing on the other side took her by surprise. It was Tom. His face was drawn, his eyes tired, but there was something different about him now, something that Sarah couldn't quite place. He looked at her, his gaze full of something, guilt, regret, maybe even a flicker of hope. "Sarah," he said softly, his voice steady but laden with the weight of their past. "I need to tell you everything." For a split second, Sarah considered walking away, shutting the door and leaving him outside. She had learned the hard way that trust was a fragile thing, and she wasn't sure she could trust Tom anymore. But then she remembered the words her mother had left for her, "Trust no one." That had always been her mother's warning, the one piece of advice she had never understood until now. She wasn't about to make the same mistake again. But as she looked into Tom's eyes, something told her that this time, she would have to listen. The truth wasn't just about uncovering secrets. It was about understanding them and deciding what to do with them. As Sarah stepped aside, allowing Tom to enter, she couldn't help but feel a strange mix of closure and uncertainty. She had survived the storm, but was she truly ready for what came next? The pieces of her life were finally coming together, but she knew better than anyone that the real story wasn't over. There were still questions left unanswered, threads left dangling. The legacy of power, the manipulation, the web of deceit, it wasn't something she could walk away from. Not completely. As Tom sat down, the door clicked softly behind him, and Sarah felt that old, familiar weight settle over her. But this time, it wasn't fear that gripped her. It was resolve. There was more to the story, more to uncover, more to understand. But one thing was certain, Sarah was no longer the pawn in someone else's game. She was the one holding the pieces now, and it was her move. And as the camera pulled back, showing Sarah and Tom sitting in silence, the lingering question hung in the air. Was the mystery really solved? Or was this just the beginning of a new chapter, one that would change everything?